Welcome back, friends. Before we begin tonight's journey into the darkest corners of Yharnam, I'd ask that if you enjoy these lore explorations, please consider subscribing. It truly helps more than you might think, and it means the world to me. Now then, make yourself comfortable, settle in, let the weight of the day fall away from your shoulders. Tonight, we're going to talk about a man whose name echoes through every blood-soaked cobblestone of Yharnam. A man who wanted to save humanity and ended up damning it. A man who made a promise to his mentor, looked him in the eye, and broke that promise in the worst way imaginable. Tonight, we talk about Laurence. You've seen his skull sitting there on that altar in the Grand Cathedral. You've walked past it a dozen times, maybe more, never quite understanding what it meant. Just another piece of grim decoration in a city full of horrors. But that skull tells a story, a tragedy, really. The tragedy of a brilliant man who reached too far, grasped something he couldn't control, and watched everything he loved burn because of it. Laurence wasn't a villain. That's what makes his story so heartbreaking. He wasn't some cackling madman seeking power for its own sake. He was a scholar, a dreamer, a man who genuinely believed he could make the world better. And in trying to lift humanity to the stars, he dragged it down into a nightmare from which it would never wake. So let's go back before the healing church, back before the beast plague, back before Yharnam became the corpse of a city that it is, when we first step through those gates. Let's go back to a place called Byrgenwerth, where it all began. Chapter 1, The Halls of Byrgenwerth. Picture a college, not the kind you might be thinking of, with sprawling campuses and thousands of students. Something older, more intimate. A place where a handful of brilliant minds gathered to push the boundaries of human knowledge. That was Byrgenwerth. The building still stands. You know, you can visit it in the game, though by the time we arrive, it's become something else entirely. A haunted shell of its former self, crawling with things that were once scholars, guarded by secrets that refused to stay buried. But once, long ago, it was alive with discovery, with hope, with the electric thrill of minds brushing against truths that had been hidden since the beginning of time. Master Willem founded Byrgenwerth. We don't know much about his early life, about what drove him to establish this institution, dedicated to uncovering the secrets of the cosmos. But we know what he believed. We know his philosophy, his guiding principle, the words that he lived by, and that he tried to instill in every student who passed through his doors. We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood, fear the old blood. Those words would come to define everything. They would become the fault line along which the entire world would crack. But in those early days, they were simply wisdom, a warning from a man who understood, perhaps better than anyone, just how dangerous their research truly was. You see, the scholars of Byrgenwerth weren't studying ordinary things. They weren't cataloguing plants, or mapping coastlines, or debating philosophy. They were reaching into the darkness between the stars and trying to understand what looked back. They called them the Great Ones, cosmic entities of incomprehensible power and alien intelligence. Beings that existed on a plane so far removed from human experience that simply perceiving them could shatter a mind like glass. Willem believed that humanity's next step in evolution lay in ascending to meet these beings, not through blood, not through physical transformation, but through insight, through expanding the mind until it could perceive truths that ordinary consciousness couldn't grasp. He sought to line his brain with eyes, to see what couldn't be seen, to know what couldn't be known. It was a dangerous path, certainly. Many of his students went mad in the pursuit, but Willem believed it was the only safe path, the only way to touch the divine without being consumed by it. And among his students, none was more promising than a young man named Laurence. Chapter 2, The Brightest Student. We don't know where Laurence came from. His past before Byrgenwerth is a mystery, lost to time and the chaos that would eventually consume all records of this era. But we know what kind of man he was. Brilliant, charismatic, driven by an almost desperate need to help people, to make a difference. to leave the world better than he found it. Willem saw something special in Laurence. A keen mind, certainly, but more than that, a passion, a fire, the kind of burning determination that could either illuminate the world or reduce it to ashes. Willem nurtured that flame carefully, teaching Laurence everything he knew, sharing with him the deepest secrets of Byrgenwerth's research. And Laurence learned. Oh, how he learned. He devoured knowledge like a starving man at a feast. He spent long nights in the Byrgenwerth library, poring over texts that would have driven lesser minds to madness. He participated in expeditions to places that shouldn't exist, saw things that couldn't be real, and somehow maintained his sanity through it all. He was everything Willem could have hoped for in a successor. But there was something else in Laurence, something Willem either didn't see or chose to ignore, an impatience, a frustration with the slow, careful methods that Willem espoused. Laurence looked at humanity's suffering, at the diseases and the death and the endless parade of misery that defined mortal existence, and he couldn't accept the idea of waiting, of taking things slowly, of letting generations pass while they inched toward enlightenment, one painful step at a time. Laurence wanted results. He wanted to help people now, not in some distant future that he might never live to see. And that impatience, that burning need to make a difference immediately, would become the crack through which everything would eventually fall apart. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the schism, before the betrayal, there was a discovery that would change everything. Chapter 3. The Chalice Dungeons. Beneath the earth, there are places that human beings were never meant to find. Vast labyrinths of impossible architecture, stretching down into darkness so complete that it seems to have weight. The Peuthemerian labyrinths, the Chalice Dungeons. Call them what you will, they are old, older than Yharnam, older than recorded history, older, perhaps, than humanity itself. The Peuthemerians built them, an ancient civilization that we know almost nothing about, except that they achieved things that modern humans couldn't begin to replicate. They found ways to commune with the Great Ones. They unlocked secrets of blood and flesh and spirit that gave them power beyond imagining. And then they disappeared, leaving only their vast underground tombs behind, filled with treasures and horrors in equal measure. The scholars of Byrgenwerth discovered these labyrinths. We don't know exactly how or when. Perhaps they followed old maps or ancient texts. Perhaps they stumbled upon an entrance by accident. But once they found them, they couldn't stay away. The dungeons called to them, promising answers to questions they'd been asking their entire lives. Laurence was among those who descended into the depths. He walked those lightless corridors, fought the twisted things that still guarded the Peuthemerian dead, and saw wonders that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. He saw architecture that defied physics. He saw technology that shouldn't exist. He saw evidence of a civilization that had achieved everything Willem dreamed of, and more. And then he found the blood. Chapter 4. The old blood. In the deepest reaches of the labyrinth, the scholars discovered something extraordinary. The blood of a great one. Not just traces or residue, but quantities of it. Enough to study, enough to experiment with, enough to change everything. This was the old blood, the forbidden substance that Willem had warned against from the very beginning. And when Laurence first beheld it, when he first understood what it could do, something shifted inside him. The old blood had properties that defied explanation. It could heal any wound. It could cure any disease. A single drop could pull someone back from the brink of death. It was miraculous. It was divine, and Laurence looked at it and saw the answer to every prayer humanity had ever whispered into the uncaring dark. Think about what that must have been like for him. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to helping people, who burned with the need to ease suffering wherever he found it. And now he held in his hands a substance that could do exactly that. No more plague, no more cancer, no more watching children die of diseases that shouldn't exist in a just universe. The old blood could fix everything. Willem saw it differently. The old master understood something that Laurence, in his excitement, couldn't see. The blood wasn't a gift, it was a trap, a honey-sweet poison that would taste like salvation right up until the moment it destroyed everything it touched. Willem had spent decades studying the Great Ones, and he knew one thing above all else. Nothing they offered came without a price. Fear the old blood, he told Laurence. By the gods, fear it. But Laurence was already lost. He had seen too much possibility, too much hope. The idea of walking away from the old blood, of leaving that healing power locked away in the darkness, while people suffered and died above, was unthinkable to him. It would have been a betrayal of everything he believed in, and so Laurence made his choice. Chapter 5. The Schism. The confrontation between Laurence and Willem is one of the most important moments in Bloodborne's history. We see a glimpse of it in the game, a memory preserved in a nightmare, and it tells us everything we need to know about both men. Laurence came to Willem to say goodbye. He had made his decision. He was leaving Byrgenwerth, and he was taking the old blood with him. He was going to use it to help people, regardless of what his old master thought. But he wanted Willem to understand. He wanted absolution, perhaps, or at least acknowledgement. Willem sat in his chair, old and tired, the weight of knowledge pressing down on him like physical burden. He had seen this coming. Perhaps he had seen it from the very first day Laurence walked through his doors. Some students were meant to surpass their teachers. Others were meant to destroy everything their teachers had built. You must accept your and death, Willem said. It wasn't cruelty. It was a statement of fact. A final warning from a man who knew what was coming, but was powerless to stop it. Fear the old blood. And Laurence, standing in the doorway, made a promise. He looked at the man who had taught him everything, the man who had shaped his mind and given him purpose, and he said words that would prove to be the most hollow oath in history. I know, I won't forget. I won't forget our adage. Then he walked away. He took his followers with him. He took the old blood, and he left Willem alone, in Byrgenwerth, surrounded by empty halls and broken dreams. Laurence would forget. Of course he would forget. That was always the tragedy. He didn't set out to break his promise. He didn't walk away, intending to betray everything he'd sworn to uphold. But the blood has a way of making you forget. It whispers to you. It changes you. And by the time you realize what you've become, it's far too late. Chapter 6. The Birth of the Healing Church. Laurence didn't waste time. He was a man possessed, driven by a vision that seemed clearer and more urgent with every passing day. The old blood could save humanity, and he was going to make sure it did. All he needed was a framework, an institution, a way to distribute this miraculous substance to the people who needed it most. And so he founded the Healing Church. The city of Yharnam became his base of operations. It was a practical choice in many ways. The city sat close to the Pthumerian labyrinths, giving him continued access to the source of the blood. It was large enough to be significant, but not so large that he would be lost in bureaucracy and politics, and its people were desperate. They suffered from all the same diseases and miseries as everyone else, and they were ready to believe in something, anything. The Healing Church presented itself as a religious institution, which was clever in its own dark way. Religion gave Laurence legitimacy. It gave him authority. It wrapped his research in the comfortable clothing of faith, making it easier for ordinary people to accept things they couldn't possibly understand. You don't need to comprehend the science behind a miracle. You just need to believe. Blood ministration became the central sacrament of this new faith. The sick and the dying would come to the church, and they would receive transfusions of the old blood. And it worked. That was the terrible thing. It actually worked. People who should have died got better. Wounds that should have been fatal closed and healed. Diseases that had been death sentences simply vanished. Word spread quickly. Yharnam became known throughout the world as a place of healing. People came from distant lands, desperate pilgrims, seeking cures for afflictions that no ordinary medicine could touch, and the Healing Church welcomed them all. The blood flowed freely, and for a brief, shining moment, It seemed like Laurence's dream might actually come true. But Willem's warning echoed in the background, growing louder with each passing day. Fear the old blood. The price hadn't been paid yet, but it would be. It always would be. Chapter 7. The First Signs. No one knows exactly when the first beast appeared. In the chaos that would eventually consume Yharnam, such records were lost or destroyed, but we know it happened gradually, slowly. A creeping horror that was easy to ignore at first, easy to explain away as something else. Maybe it started with changes in temperament, people who had received blood ministration becoming more aggressive, more prone to violence. Little things that could be attributed to stress or circumstance. A man gets into a fight at a tavern. A woman lashes out at her children. Nothing that would raise alarm bells. Nothing that would suggest something fundamentally wrong. Then the physical changes began. Subtle at first. Hair growing thicker and more coarse. Teeth becoming sharper. Nails hardening into something that looked disturbingly like claws. Still easy to dismiss if you tried hard enough. Side effects, perhaps. Unusual reactions to the treatment, nothing to worry about. But the changes didn't stop, they accelerated. And eventually, inevitably, someone transformed completely. Picture it. A man who came to Yharnam for healing. A husband, maybe, or a father. Someone with people who loved him, who were depending on him to get better and come home. He receives the blood ministration. He feels wonderful, better than he has in years. He writes letters to his family, telling them the good news. He makes plans for the future. And then one night, he doesn't remember going to sleep. He doesn't remember dreaming. He only remembers waking up covered in blood that isn't his own, surrounded by bodies that used to be people, with a hunger in his gut that no amount of food could ever satisfy. The man was gone. In his place was a beast, a twisted mockery of human form, driven by nothing but the need to feed. And somewhere in the depths of that savage mind, trapped and screaming and unable to stop any of it, was the person he used to be. This was the scourge of beasts, the price of the old blood, the bill finally coming due. Chapter 8. Denial and Desperation. Laurence knew. He had to know. You can't found an institution built on blood ministration and remain ignorant when people start turning into monsters. The healing church knew exactly what was happening, and they knew exactly what was causing it. The question was what to do about it. A braver man might have stopped. A wiser man might have admitted his mistake, shut down the blood ministration, and tried to find another way. But Laurence wasn't brave, not in the way that mattered. And wisdom had deserted him the moment he first beheld the old blood's miraculous properties. Instead of stopping, he doubled down. He convinced himself that the beasthood was a flaw to be overcome, not a fundamental consequence of the blood itself. If they could just refine their methods, if they could just find purer blood, if they could just control the transformation somehow, then everything would be fine. The dream could still come true. The healing church began hunting beasts in secret. They couldn't allow the public to know what was happening. If people learned that the miraculous blood treatment was turning patients into monsters, the church would be finished. Everything Laurence had built would come crashing down. So they covered it up. They formed teams of hunters, skilled killers who would roam the streets at night and destroy any beast they found before anyone could see it. This was the origin of the hunters. Not heroes defending humanity from an external threat, but janitors cleaning up a mess that the healing church itself had created. Every beast they killed was someone who had come to Yharnam seeking help. Every monster they put down was a direct consequence of Laurence's choices. And still, the blood ministration continued. Still the pilgrims came. Still the church welcomed them with open arms and promised them healing. Because stopping would mean admitting that Willem had been right all along. And Laurence couldn't do that. He couldn't accept that his life's work was a catastrophe. He couldn't face the truth that his desperate need to help people had turned him into something far worse than any beast. Chapter 9. German and the Workshop. Laurence needed hunters. skilled killers who could be trusted to keep the church's secrets, while eliminating the beasts that threatened to expose everything. And he knew exactly who to ask. Yharnam was an old comrade from the Byrgenwerth days, a man of particular talents. Where Laurence had excelled at scholarship and leadership, Yharnam had excelled at violence. He was a fighter, a weapon maker, a man who understood how to kill things that didn't want to die. And when Laurence came to him with a proposition, Yharnam listened. We don't know exactly what Laurence promised him. Perhaps it was money, perhaps it was a sense of purpose. Perhaps Yharnam simply believed, as Laurence did, that they were doing necessary work, that the beasts had to be stopped, and that the blood ministration was still worth the cost. Whatever the reason, Yharnam agreed to help. He established the Hunter's Workshop, a place where weapons and tools could be designed and crafted specifically for the task of killing beasts. Yharnam invented the saw cleaver, the threaded cane, all those trick weapons that would become synonymous with the hunt. He trained the first generation of hunters, teaching them how to move, how to fight, how to survive against creatures that were stronger and faster and more savage than any human being. The workshop operated in the shadows, separate from the public face of the healing church. Hunters worked at night when the streets were empty and their bloody work could go unwitnessed. They became ghosts, rumors, things that people whispered about but never quite believed. And for a while, it worked. The beasts were kept under control. The church maintained its reputation. The blood ministration continued, but the system was fundamentally broken, and no amount of hunting could fix it. For every beast Yharnam's hunters killed, the blood was creating more. The infection was spreading faster than they could contain it. And deep in his heart, Laurence knew that it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. Chapter 10. The Choir and the School of Mensis. As the beast problem grew worse, the healing church began to fracture. Different factions emerged, each with their own ideas about how to deal with the crisis and how to continue the research that had started at Byrgenwerth. The choir was perhaps the most ambitious of these groups. They were the upper echelons of the church, the scholars and theologians who had access to the deepest secrets. They believed that the key to solving the beast problem lay not in avoiding the great ones, as Willem had advocated, but in making direct contact with them. If they could commune with these cosmic entities, if they could learn their secrets firsthand, then perhaps they could find a way to purify the blood or control the transformation. The choir established the Upper Cathedral Ward, an isolated section of the city dedicated to their research. They found an infant Great One, a being called Byrgenwerth, daughter of the cosmos, and they began studying her in earnest. They developed new methods of achieving insight, new ways of perceiving the cosmic truth that lay hidden behind reality, and they achieved results of a sort. They created the celestial emissaries, humans transformed into something approaching the Great Ones themselves. But the choir's work was dangerous, and it had consequences they couldn't foresee. In reaching toward the cosmos, they drew the attention of things that should have been left sleeping. They opened doors that couldn't be closed again. The School of Mensis took a different approach. Where the choir sought communion through careful study, Mensis sought it through ritual, through beckoning. They wanted to summon a Great One directly, to bring it into their world, where they could interact with it fully. It was a mad plan, born of desperation and hubris in equal measure, and when they finally succeeded, the result was catastrophic. But that's a story for another time. What matters here is that Laurence's healing church had become something unrecognizable. It had started as a vehicle for healing, and now it was a hydra of competing factions, each pursuing increasingly desperate and dangerous research, all while the city around them slowly descended into hell. Chapter 11. The Blood Moon Rising. The beast plague continued to worsen. What had started as isolated incidents became a pattern, then an epidemic. The hunters couldn't keep up anymore. There were too many beasts, appearing too quickly, in too many places at once. The careful secrecy that had protected the church for so long began to crumble. People started to notice. They saw the bodies. They heard the screams in the night. They caught glimpses of things that walked on two legs, but moved like animals. Rumors spread through Yharnam like fire through dry grass. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. The church's response was to impose the night of the hunt. On nights when the beast activity was particularly bad, they would lock down the city. Everyone was ordered to stay indoors, to barricade their homes, to light incense and pray that the morning would come. The hunters would be given free rein to operate openly, killing anything they found in the streets. It was a tacit admission of failure. The church could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The best they could do was manage the chaos, contain it, keep it from boiling over into complete collapse. But everyone knew, whether they admitted it or not, that the situation was spiraling out of control. And Laurence, where was the founder during all of this? What was the man who had started everything doing while his grand experiment turned into a nightmare? He was still searching, still believing, still convinced that if he could just find the right approach, the right refinement, the right answer, everything would be okay. He had sacrificed too much to give up now. His reputation, his relationship with Willem, his integrity. If the old blood was ultimately poison, then his entire life had been a waste. And Laurence couldn't accept that. He would rather damn the world than admit that he had been wrong. Chapter 12. The Nightmare. There's something we haven't talked about yet. Something that happens to hunters who give too much of themselves to the blood. Something that awaits them beyond death. The hunter's nightmare. It's a place that exists outside of normal reality, a twisted reflection of Yharnam created by the curse of the Great One. When hunters die, when they've drunk too deeply of the blood and committed too many sins in its name, their consciousness is drawn into this nightmare. They don't get to rest. They don't get to escape. They spend eternity reliving their worst moments, fighting and killing and being killed, over and over again, forever. The nightmare was created by the orphan of Kos, or rather, by the curse that sprang from that tortured being's death. But that's a complicated story, involving terrible crimes committed by the scholars of Byrgenwerth, sins that were inherited by the healing church and that continue to echo through the ages. What matters for our purposes is that the nightmare exists and that Laurence ended up there. Because Laurence died, despite everything he had done, despite all his precautions and research and desperate searching for a cure, the founder of the healing church eventually succumbed to the very plague he had created. The old blood transformed him, just as it had transformed so many others. The man who had promised Willem that he would never forget, that he would always fear the blood, became the very thing he had been warned against. Laurence became a beast. Not just any beast, the first of the cleric beasts, a massive, burning horror that retained just enough of its human mind to feel the full weight of what it had become. Chapter 13. The first cleric beast. The transformation of Laurence must have been the final blow to any hope that the healing church could survive unchanged. Their founder, their leader, the man whose vision had created everything they were, had become a monster. There was no explaining this away, no covering it up. The beast that had been Laurence was too big, too powerful, too obviously something terrible. The church did what they could. They killed the beast. They burned what remained. And they took his skull, that massive, misshapen thing that had once contained the mind of a brilliant scholar, and they placed it on the altar of the Grand Cathedral. Why did they keep it? Perhaps as a reminder, perhaps as a warning, perhaps because, even after everything, they couldn't bring themselves to fully destroy the last remnant of the man who had given them their purpose. The skull sits there still. When we first enter Yharnam, we walk past it without knowing what it means. Just another piece of gruesome decoration in a city full of death. But Laurence's death wasn't the end. The nightmare claimed him, as it claims all hunters who have been touched too deeply by the blood's corruption. His consciousness was dragged into that hellish reflection of Yharnam, and there he remains, still burning, still suffering, still trapped in the form of the beast he became. When we enter the Hunter's Nightmare in the old Hunter's DLC, we eventually find him. The boss fight against Laurence is one of the most tragic encounters in the entire game. Here is a man who wanted nothing more than to help people, who dreamed of ending human suffering, reduced to a mindless burning monster that can only attack and destroy. There's no conversation with Laurence, no redemption, no moment of clarity where he acknowledges what he's done. There's only violence, followed by death, followed by more violence. Chapter 14. The Legacy of Failure. Laurence's death didn't end the healing church. If anything, it strengthened them in a perverse way. Martyrdom has a way of cementing institution. The church canonized Laurence, made him a saint of their faith, conveniently ignoring the fact that he had transformed into the very thing they were supposed to be fighting. His successors took up his mantle and continued his work. Vicar Amelia, whom we encounter in the Grand Cathedral, is one of these successors. She kneels before Laurence's skull, praying, clutching the gold pendant that contains a lock of his hair. She too is transforming, right before our eyes, turning into a beast, even as she desperately recites the words of the church's faith. "Seek the old blood," she whispers. "Let us pray, let us wish to partake in communion. Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood." It's horrifying and sad in equal measure. The church Laurence founded has become a death cult, worshipping the very substance that is destroying them. They can't stop, they're too far gone. The blood has its hooks in them, so deeply that they would rather die, rather transform, rather spend eternity in nightmare than admit that Laurence was wrong. And in a way, that's the most damning part of Laurence's legacy. Not the beasts he created, not the city he destroyed, but the institution he left behind, so committed to his vision that they continued pursuing it long after any sane person would have stopped. The healing church is Laurence's true monument, a testament to what happens when good intentions are twisted by pride and desperation into something monstrous. Chapter 15. Willem's Vindication. We should talk about Willem, the old master of Byrgenwerth, who warned Laurence from the very beginning, who watched his brightest student walk away with the old blood, and knew, with terrible certainty, what would come next. Willem didn't pursue Laurence. He didn't try to stop the healing church by force. He simply continued. He stayed at Byrgenwerth, pursuing his own methods, seeking to line his brain with eyes and achieve insight through pure mental evolution. He let Laurence make his mistakes, knowing that there was nothing he could do to prevent them. By the time we reach Byrgenwerth in the game, Willem is barely human anymore. He sits in a chair, overlooking the moonside lake, ancient and withered, unable to speak. He has achieved something, clearly. He has evolved in ways that ordinary humans couldn't understand. But whether he has found the enlightenment he sought, or whether he has simply become another victim of forces beyond his comprehension, is left ambiguous. What's not ambiguous is that Willem was right. Every warning he gave Laurence came true. The old blood was exactly as dangerous as he said it would be. The promise Laurence made, to remember the adage and fear the blood, was broken in the worst possible way. Willem's philosophy, cautious and patient, and focus on inner transformation rather than external substances, was vindicated by the apocalypse that consumed Yharnam. But being right doesn't feel like much of a victory when you're sitting alone in a ruined building, watching the world burn in the distance. Willem's vindication is hollow. He was right, and it didn't matter. He couldn't stop Laurence. He couldn't save anyone. All he could do was watch and wait, and eventually become something that might not even remember why it was waiting. Chapter 16. The meaning of betrayal. So what do we make of Laurence? How do we understand this man who wanted to save humanity and ended up destroying a city? How do we square his noble intentions with his catastrophic results? The easy answer is to call him a villain. To say that his hubris and pride led him to ignore wisdom and pursue power at any cost. And there's truth in that. Laurence was proud. He did ignore Willem's warning. He did continue the blood ministration, long after its dangers became apparent, sacrificing countless lives on the altar of his own refusal to admit failure. But that interpretation misses something important. Laurence wasn't pursuing power for its own sake. He wasn't trying to make himself a god or rule the world or achieve immortality. Everything he did, from the founding of the church to the blood ministration to the cover-up of the beast plague, was driven by a genuine desire to help people, to ease suffering, to make the world better. That's what makes his story so tragic. Laurence was undone, not by evil impulses, but by good ones. His love for humanity, his desperate need to ease their pain, led him to reach for a solution that looked like salvation, but was actually damnation. He wasn't corrupted by malice. He was corrupted by compassion, twisted by his own inability to accept the limitations of what he could achieve. There's a lesson there, I think, a warning about the dangers of believing too strongly in your own righteousness. Laurence was so certain that he was doing the right thing, so convinced that the old blood was the answer to humanity's prayers, that he couldn't see the destruction he was causing. His faith in his own good intentions blinded him to the evil he was actually doing. Chapter 17. The City of Yharnam. Let's step back and look at what Laurence created. Not just the healing church, but the entire city that grew up around it. Yharnam, when we first arrive, is a masterpiece of decayed grandeur, Gothic architecture, stretching toward a sky that seems perpetually overcast, streets that wind and twist like intestines, leading nowhere and everywhere at once. A city that was clearly beautiful once, clearly prosperous, now reduced to a charnel house of beasts and corpses and survivors too mad or desperate to escape. Every stone of Yharnam was laid by the healing church. Every building was constructed to serve their needs. The grand cathedral at the city's heart, the clinic at its borders, where newcomers receive their first taste of the blood, the graveyards and the hospitals, and the workshops and the wards, all of it flowing outward from Laurence's original vision, like ripples from a stone thrown into water. The citizens who still remain are far gone. Some have locked themselves in their houses, clutching weapons and incense, praying for dawn and refusing to open their doors for anyone. Others have organized into mobs, hunting beasts and strangers alike with equal fervor. Still others have been touched by the blood themselves, transforming by degrees into something that isn't quite human but isn't quite beast, stuck in a horrible middle ground of partial metamorphosis. This is Laurence's legacy. This is what his dream of healing became. A city of nightmares, populated by victims, haunted by monsters that were created by the very institution that promised salvation. Every corpse in Yharnam is an accusation. Every beast is a monument to his failure. Chapter 18. The Hunters Who Came After. Laurence may have started the hunt, but he didn't finish it. After his transformation and death, others took up the mantle. Other hunters, wearing the garb of the church, or the workshop, or later factions, continued to stalk the streets of Yharnam and try to contain the plague that grew worse with every passing night. Some of them became legends. Ludwig, the Holy Blade, who was the first hunter of the healing church proper, a man of tremendous faith and skill who believed, truly believed, that he was doing sacred work. He founded the church, hunters, and established the traditions that would define them for generations. And in the end, he too fell to the beast plague, transformed into something horrible, trapped in the nightmare just like his master Laurence. There was Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, student of Yharnam, one of the most skilled hunters to ever live. She was there for the sins committed at the fishing hamlet, the terrible crimes that created the curse behind the hunter's nightmare. The guilt of that night broke her. She threw away her weapon and retreated to the clock tower, where she remained until we find her, guarding the secret of the nightmare and the orphan of Kos. There were countless others, names we know and names we don't. Hunters who answered the call, who believed they were making a difference, who eventually discovered the horrible truth at the heart of everything they had been told. Some went mad, some died, some transformed, and some few, the very best or very luckiest, found ways to escape the cycle entirely. But none of them could fix what Laurence had broken. The beast plague was beyond fixing by the time it became visible. The old blood had sunk too deep into Yharnam's foundations. Every person who had ever received blood ministration was a ticking time bomb, a potential beast waiting to emerge. The hunters weren't solving the problem. They were managing it, the same way you manage a terminal illness. Buying time, nothing more. Chapter 19. The night we arrive, and then we come to Yharnam. Our character, the protagonist of Bloodborne, arrives seeking blood ministration. Perhaps we're sick. Perhaps we're dying. Perhaps we've simply heard the rumors and want to see this miraculous healing for ourselves. Whatever our reason, we find our way to Yharnam's clinic on the outskirts of the city, and we receive our first transfusion. The blood enters our veins, and nothing is ever the same again. We wake up in the clinic, alone and confused. There are beasts on the floor, surrounding the table where we lay moments before. A werewolf tears through them like paper, and then turns its attention to us. We wake up in the hunter's dream, that strange sanctuary outside of reality, and we meet Yharnam. He tells us that this is our life now. We are a hunter. Our purpose is to seek pale blood and transcend the hunt. And so begins our journey through the nightmare that Laurence created. We walk the streets he built. We fight the beasts his blood made. We encounter the church he founded, the hunters he inspired, the factions that grew from his original vision. Everything we see, everything we fight, everything we discover leads back to that moment in Byrgenwerth, when a young scholar looked at forbidden blood and saw salvation. We are inheritors of Laurence's failure. We are another victim of his dream, and we are, perhaps, the only one who can finally end what he started. Chapter 20. Confronting the Founder. When we enter the Hunter's Nightmare, in the old Hunter's DLC, we eventually make our way to the grand cathedral of that twisted realm. And there, standing before an altar that mirrors the one in the waking world, we find what remains of Laurence. His skull is missing. That's the first thing we notice. The massive skull that sits in the real Grand Cathedral is not on the altar here because it was removed, taken as a trophy or a relic by the church after they killed the beast Laurence became. What remains is just the body, burning eternally, wreathed in flames that never quite consume it. When we approach, when we take the skull we've been carrying and return it to its proper place, Laurence awakens, and we find it's a brutal battle. Laurence is enormous, far larger than a normal cleric beast. He attacks with fire and fury, leaving trails of flame wherever he goes, screaming in a voice that might once have been human, but is now nothing more than bestial rage. There's no recognition in those burning eyes, no acknowledgement of who we are or what we represent. Just hunger, just violence, just the endless repetition of a nightmare that will never end. When we finally defeat him, when his massive form collapses and dissolves into nothing, there's no sense of victory, no triumphant music, no feeling of accomplishment. We've put down a beast, the same as dozens of others we've killed throughout the game. The only difference is that this beast used to be someone important, someone who mattered, someone who dreamed of a better world, and ended up creating hell instead. Laurence doesn't get a redemption arc. He doesn't get a moment of clarity. He doesn't get to apologize or explain or justify himself. He gets death, and then presumably more nightmare, and then more death. Forever. That's the price of the old blood. That's what it costs to reach for salvation through forbidden means. Chapter 21. What could have been? It's worth thinking about what might have happened if things had gone differently. If Laurence had listened to Willem, if he had feared the old blood, truly feared it, the way his master warned him to, Yharnam would still be a city, a normal city, with normal problems, populated by normal people, living normal lives. There would be no beast plague, no hunters, no nightmare. The Pthumerian labyrinths would remain unexplored, their secrets and their horrors locked away in the darkness, where they belong. The great ones would still be out there, of course. Cosmic entities don't cease to exist just because humans aren't looking for them, but they would be distant, uninvolved, sleeping their eternal sleep in whatever impossible space they call home, unconcerned with the brief flickering lives of creatures too small to notice. Would that have been better? Willem would say yes. The price of the old blood, measured in transformed victims and destroyed cities and eternal nightmares, is too high for any benefit it might provide. Better to leave some questions unanswered. Better to accept human limitations than to transcend them and become something inhuman in the process. But Laurence would have disagreed right up until the end. He would have pointed to the people he healed, the diseases he cured, the lives he saved. He would have argued that the benefits outweighed the costs, even as the costs mounted beyond all imagination. He would have believed, genuinely and sincerely, that he was doing the right thing. That's the tragedy. Both men were right, and both men were wrong. Willem was right about the dangers of the old blood, but wrong to think that humanity could evolve without it. Laurence was right that the blood could help people, but wrong to think that the help was worth the horror. They were two halves of a complete understanding, and because they couldn't reconcile their differences, the world paid the price. Chapter 22. The Weight of Good Intentions. There's something deeply unsettling about Laurence's story when you really think about it, because Laurence isn't a monster. Not at first. He's not even a particularly flawed person. He's a good man who makes bad choices for good reasons, and the consequences of those choices spiral so far beyond anything he could have imagined that they fundamentally reshape the world. We like to think that good intentions matter, that if we mean well, if we're trying to help, the universe will somehow recognize that and protect us from the worst outcomes. Laurence proves that this isn't true. The universe doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about actions and the results of those actions, regardless of what motivated them. Every beast in Yharnam is there because someone wanted to help. Every corpse in the streets is there because the healing church was trying to ease suffering. Every nightmare, every horror, every twisted mockery of human form exists because a kind and brilliant man couldn't accept his own limitations. The road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions. It was designed and constructed by them, carefully and with tremendous effort. This is uncomfortable to think about. We want to believe that we're different, that our good intentions are somehow purer, more considered, less likely to lead to catastrophe. But Laurence probably thought the same thing. He was brilliant and careful and motivated by love. And look what happened. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. It could happen to us. Chapter 23. The Addiction of Progress. There's another dimension to Laurence's failure that deserves attention. The way he continued, even after he knew the truth. The way he doubled down on blood ministration, even as the beasts multiplied and the hunters fell and the city descended into chaos. This is what addiction looks like at an institutional scale. Laurence was addicted to progress, to the feeling of moving forward, of making things better, of accumulating victories, no matter how small. Every person he healed was proof that he was right. Every disease cured was validation of his choices. And when the costs began to mount, when the beasts began to appear, he couldn't stop, because stopping would mean admitting that all those previous victories were hollow. The healing church as a whole developed this same addiction. They couldn't abandon blood ministration because it was the foundation of everything they were. Their identity, their purpose, their reason for existence, all depended on the old blood being beneficial. To admit otherwise would be to admit that the entire institution was built on a lie, that centuries of work had been worse than useless, that they had been villains all along, dressed up in the clothing of heroes. So they kept going. They refined their methods. They founded new factions, pursuing new approaches. They told themselves that they were making progress, that they were getting closer to a breakthrough, that the beast plague would eventually be solved if they just worked hard enough and believed strongly enough. And all the while, the nightmare grew deeper and the blood flowed faster and more people were transformed into monsters. This is what institutions do when they can't admit failure. They double down, they rationalize, they reframe obvious catastrophes as temporary setbacks on the road to ultimate success. And by the time they finally confront the truth, if they ever do, the damage has become irreparable. Chapter 24. The Blood Echoes. We leave behind. Let's talk about blood echoes for a moment. The The currency of Bloodborne, the thing we collect from fallen enemies and use to grow stronger. What are they, really? The game doesn't explain this explicitly, but the implication is clear enough. Blood echoes are memories, experiences, the accumulated weight of lives lived and ended. When we kill a beast, we're not just taking its blood, we're taking everything it was. Its history, its identity, the person it used to be before the plague transformed it into something unrecognizable. This is monstrous. When you think about it, we grow stronger by consuming the essence of our victims. We level up by literally devouring the humanity of those we kill. The hunters are not noble warriors defending the innocent. They are predators feeding on the memories of the transformed, becoming more powerful with each life they extinguish. And Laurence created this system. He established the hunt, knowing what it would require. He sent Gehrman to build the workshop, knowing what the hunters would have to become. Every blood echo we collect, every level we gain, every point of strength and skill we accumulate, is built on a foundation of consumed souls. We are inheritors of Laurence's morality, which is to say we have inherited his willingness to do horrible things in pursuit of what we believe is a greater good. Chapter 25. The Transformation Within. Here's something we don't often think about when playing Bloodborne. We, the player character, are also transforming. We receive blood ministration at the beginning of the game. We die and resurrect countless times. Our connection to the hunter's dream, keeping us anchored to reality in ways that shouldn't be possible. We consume blood echoes and grow stronger. We inject ourselves with blood vials and foreign blood and who knows what else in the course of our journey. The game tracks this. There's a stat called beasthood that increases as we sink deeper into the hunt. Some equipment and items actively encourage this transformation, giving us bonuses to damage at the cost of our humanity. We can dress in beast hide clothing, wield weapons designed to channel our savage impulses, push ourselves closer and closer to the edge that Laurence fell over. We like to think we're different, that we're the hero of this story, that our transformation is under control, that we'll never lose ourselves the way so many others have. But that's exactly what Laurence thought. That's exactly what every hunter thought, right up until the moment they realized they had gone too far. The genius of Bloodborne's design is that it implicates us in Laurence's sins. We're not external observers judging his failures from a position of moral superiority. We're participants in the system he created, beneficiaries of the infrastructure he built, users of the very blood that damned him. When we condemn Laurence, we condemn ourselves. When we pity him, we're forced to acknowledge that we're walking the same path. Chapter 26. The Nature of Nightmares. The hunter's nightmare is a prison. We've established that. But it's worth thinking about what kind of prison it is and what it means for those trapped within it. Nightmares in Bloodborne aren't just bad dreams. They're pocket dimensions, created and maintained by the will of great ones. The hunter's nightmare specifically was created by the orphan of Kos, or perhaps by Kos herself in the moment of her death, as a curse on those who wronged her. Every hunter who has been corrupted by the blood, who has committed sins in the name of the hunt, is eventually drawn into this realm to suffer for eternity. Laurence is in the deepest part of this nightmare. He's not just another victim, he's a central figure, placed in the grand cathedral that mirrors his own seat of power in the waking world. He's forced to repeat his transformation, to become a beast again and again, to experience the horror of losing his humanity on an infinite loop. Is this justice? The orphan's curse doesn't discriminate based on moral culpability. It takes all hunters who have been touched by the blood, regardless of whether they were willing participants in the church's sins, or innocent victims who had no choice. Laurence, who created the system, suffers alongside hunters who were simply doing what they were told. The punishment isn't proportional, it's absolute. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the curse isn't about justice at all. Maybe it's about truth. The hunter's nightmare strips away all pretense, all justification, all rationalization. In the nightmare, you are what you are. You have done what you have done, and there's no escaping the weight of it. Chapter 27. Gehrman's imprisonment. Let's take a moment to consider Gehrman, Laurence's old friend and collaborator, because his fate might be even worse than Laurence's. In its own way, Gehrman helped Laurence build the hunt. He created the workshop. He trained the first hunters. He was there from the beginning, a willing participant in everything that followed, and his reward was an eternity of servitude, trapped in the hunter's dream, bound to guide new hunters through their journeys, and then offer them release through his blade. We don't know exactly how this happened. The details are murky, lost in the same fog that obscures so much of Bloodborne's history, but we know that the moon presence, a great one of mysterious origins and intentions, is responsible. Gehrman made some kind of deal, or was trapped by some kind of trick, and now he exists in a state that isn't quite life and isn't quite death, forever serving a purpose he didn't choose. When we meet Gehrman, he's old and tired and sad. He naps by the flowers in the hunter's dream, mumbling about someone named Laurence and someone named Lady Maria. He offers advice when we need it, but there's no enthusiasm in his voice. He's been doing this for so long that all the meaning has drained out of it. At the end of the game, Gehrman offers to kill us. It's presented as a mercy, a chance to wake up from the nightmare and return to the waking world with no memory of what we've experienced. But there's also desperation in the offer. Gehrman wants someone to take his place. He wants to be free, finally, after all these years, and if we accept his offer, he keeps on going, trapped for another cycle, serving another hunter, waiting for another chance at release. This is what Laurence left behind. His best friend imprisoned in an endless loop of service. His legacy, a system of exploitation and suffering that perpetuates itself eternally. Even the people who were closest to him, who trusted him, who helped him build his dream, were ultimately destroyed by it. Chapter 28. The Orphan's Curse. We should talk about the fishing hamlet, about what happened there, and how it connects to everything else. Before the healing church was founded, while the scholars of Byrgenwerth were still exploring the Pethymerian labyrinths, they discovered something else, a small fishing village on the coast, populated by people who had been touched by something from the sea, something cosmic, something that had granted them gifts and changes, and a connection to powers beyond human understanding. The scholars descended on the village, like wolves. They were searching for eyes, for insight, for anything that could advance their understanding of the Great Ones, and they found it, at a terrible cost. They slaughtered the villagers, they experimented on them, they desecrated the corpse of Kos, a Great One who had washed up on the shore, and they stole her child from her body. This was Byrgenwerth's great sin, the crime that Willem and Laurence both inherited. The curse of the hunter's nightmare springs from this moment, from the orphan of Kos, screaming in rage and grief, and calling down vengeance on everyone who was involved or who would benefit from what was done. Laurence wasn't at the fishing hamlet, or if he was, we have no evidence of it. But he inherited the guilt anyway, because he inherited the research. The knowledge gained from those atrocities became the foundation of the healing church. Every advancement, every breakthrough, every miracle of blood ministration was built on a foundation of murder and theft. This is what original sin looks like. A crime committed before we were involved, whose consequences we inherit, whether we like it or not. Laurence wasn't the worst person in this chain of causation. That distinction probably belongs to whoever ordered the assault on the fishing hamlet, but Laurence benefited from it. He used the tainted knowledge. He built his church on bones that weren't his to take, and so the curse took him too. Chapter 29. The three endings. When we complete Bloodborne, we're offered three possible endings, three different fates for our character, representing three different relationships with the nightmare Laurence created. In the first ending, we accept Gehrman's offer. He kills us, kindly and quickly, and we wake up in Yharnam as the sun rises. We've escaped the nightmare. We remember nothing of what happened. The city is still ruined. The beast plague still rages, but we're free. We've broken the cycle for ourselves, if not for anyone else. In the second ending, we refuse Gehrman's offer and fight him. We win, because we've been growing stronger throughout our journey, and we take his place. Now we're the one bound to Hunter's dream, guiding future hunters, offering them the same choice that was offered to us. The cycle continues, with a new face. In the third ending, the true ending, we do something different. We consume 1/3 of umbilical cord items, remnants of great ones that grant us insight beyond normal human capacity. Then we refuse Gehrman's offer, defeat him, and when the moon presence descends to claim us, we fight it too. We win, and we transform, not into a beast, but into something else. A great one ourselves, an infant god, cradled by the doll, ready to begin an existence beyond anything human. This third ending is fascinating in the context of Laurence's story, because what we achieve is exactly what Laurence was trying to achieve. Transcendence, evolution, a step beyond the limitations of human existence. We succeed where he failed. We use the blood and the insight and the accumulated power of our journey to become something new, something greater, something that might actually be able to make a difference. But is it really success? We're a great one now, yes, but we're an infant. We understand nothing. We have power beyond imagination, but no wisdom to use it. And the world is still ruined. Yharnam is still a nightmare. The beast plague still rages. Our transcendence saves no one but ourselves. Chapter 30, The Eternal Return. Here's the thing about Bloodborne that doesn't get talked about enough. Nothing we do matters. Not really. Not in any lasting sense. We kill beasts, and more beasts appear. We defeat bosses, and the nightmare continues. We transcend humanity itself, and the world remains unchanged. Yharnam was dying before we arrived, and it will continue dying after we leave. Our journey is fundamentally personal. We can save ourselves, in one way or another, but we cannot save anyone else. Laurence tried to save everyone. That was his great ambition, his driving purpose, the fire that burned at the center of his being. He looked at humanity's suffering, and he couldn't accept it. He had to do something. He had to make a difference. And in reaching for salvation on a grand scale, he created damnation instead. We, by contrast, are much more modest. We're just trying to survive, just trying to wake up from the nightmare, just trying to find some kind of peace in a world that offers none. And maybe that's why we succeed where Laurence failed. We don't have the hubris to think we can fix everything. We just want to fix ourselves. But there's something sad about that too. Something small. Laurence's vision was terrible in its consequences, but it was grand in its conception. He dreamed of a better world for everyone. We dream only of escape for ourselves. Who is really the hero here? Chapter 31. The Question of Memory. Fear the old blood. Willem said it. Laurence promised to remember it, and then Laurence forgot, as he always was going to forget. As everyone who touches the old blood eventually forgets. Memory is a strange thing in Bloodborne. The blood makes you forget. It erases your connection to who you were, replacing it with something else, something hungrier and more savage. The beast that was once Laurence doesn't remember being Laurence. It just knows rage and fire and the need to destroy. But the game also suggests that memory persists. Ghosts linger in the hunter's nightmare, reliving moments from their past. Messages can be left and read across different realities. The doll in the hunter's dream was modeled after Lady Maria, because Gehrman couldn't let go of his love for her, even after she was gone. Laurence is remembered. That's something. His skull sits in the Grand Cathedral, and players who know the lore understand its significance. We know who he was. We know what he dreamed. We know how he fell. His story persists, passed from player to player, analyzed and discussed and debated across forums and videos, and late-night conversations. Is that a kind of immortality, not the kind Laurence wanted? Certainly, he wanted to transcend through the blood, to evolve into something greater, to lift humanity to the stars. Instead, he became a cautionary tale, a warning. The founder who betrayed everything, remembered not for his achievements, but for his failures. Maybe that's the only immortality any of us can hope for. to be remembered, to have our stories told, to serve as examples, for better or worse, for those who come after. Laurence would probably prefer to be forgotten entirely, if the alternative is being remembered like this, but he doesn't get that choice. None of us do. Chapter 32, a final meditation. So here we are, at the end of our journey. We've traced Laurence's path from the promising scholar at Byrgenwerth to the burning beast in the nightmare. We've seen how his dream of healing became a plague of transformation. We've watched his legacy corrupt and consume everything it touched. And what have we learnt? What wisdom can we carry away from this tale of ambition and disaster? Perhaps this, that the desire to help is not enough, that good intentions can pave roads to places we never meant to go, that wisdom lies not in reaching for every opportunity, but in knowing which opportunities to leave untouched. Laurence saw the old blood and saw salvation. Willem saw it and saw damnation. They were both looking at the same thing, but they saw completely different futures. And in the end, Willem was right, not because he was smarter or better, but because he was willing to accept limits that Laurence refused to acknowledge. There are things we cannot do. There are prices we cannot afford to pay. There are doors that should remain closed, no matter how brightly the light shines through the cracks. This is wisdom. This is maturity. This is the understanding that Laurence never achieved, no matter how brilliant he was in other ways. The old blood is still out there. Not literally, of course. Bloodborne is a game, and its horrors exist only in fiction. But the old blood is also a metaphor, a symbol for every seductive power that promises salvation at a hidden cost. Every shortcut, every miracle cure, every solution that seems too good to be true because it is too good to be true. We encounter our own old blood every day. The question is whether we fear it properly, whether we remember the adage, as Laurence promised to and failed to, whether we can look at power and potential and say, no, the cost is too high. I will find another way. Laurence couldn't say no. He tried, maybe. He promised Willem that he would. But in the end, the blood was too tempting, the potential too vast, the promise of helping people too overwhelming. He reached out and took what was offered, and everything followed from that one moment of weakness. Closing, the fire burns eternal in the hunter's nightmare. Laurence, or what remains of him, writhes in agony that will never end. His dream of healing has become a reality of endless suffering, and there is no redemption waiting at the end of the road. But we remember him. We tell his story. We learn from his mistakes, or at least we try to. And maybe that's something. Maybe that's the only victory available in a world where nightmares are real and the blood never stops calling. Sleep well, friends. Dream of better things than Laurence dreamed. And when you wake, remember, some doors are meant to stay closed. Some blood is meant to stay in the ground. Some prices are too high to pay, no matter what wonders they might buy. Fear the old blood. Always fear the old blood. But wait, there's more to explore. More corners of this nightmare to illuminate. More threads of Laurence's legacy to unravel. Let's continue, shall we? Chapter 33, The Architecture of Belief. One of the most fascinating aspects of what Laurence built is the way he structured belief itself. The Healing Church wasn't just an organization. It was a framework for understanding reality, a lens through which the people of Yharnam came to see the world. Think about what the church taught. The blood heals. The great ones are divine. Communion with these cosmic entities is the highest aspiration of the human soul. These weren't presented as hypotheses to be tested or theories to be debated. They were articles of faith, to be accepted without question, to be defended against doubt. This is how Laurence maintained control, even as everything fell apart. The beast plague was devastating, yes, but the church's interpretation of the plague kept people loyal. The beasts weren't evidence that the blood was dangerous. They were sinners, impure souls, people who had failed to properly commune with the divine. The plague wasn't a consequence of the church's practices. It was a test of faith, a tribulation to be endured, a purification that would ultimately separate the worthy from the unworthy. You can see this theology reflected in the people we meet throughout Yharnam. The old woman who gives us sedatives, muttering about the cursed beasts who brought this upon them. The chapel dweller who believes that incense and faith will protect him from the plague. Even the hunters themselves, many of whom continue to believe in the church's mission, long after its corruption has become undeniable. This is the insidious genius of what Laurence created. The system was self-reinforcing. Every failure became evidence for more faith, not less. Every disaster proved the need for greater devotion. The worse things got, the tighter people clung to the beliefs that were causing the problem in the first place. Chapter 34. The economics of blood. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough in Bloodborne lore. The blood wasn't just a spiritual substance, it was an economic one. The healing church was, among other things, a massive commercial enterprise. And understanding this helps explain why they were so reluctant to stop. Yharnam became wealthy because of the blood. Pilgrims came from across the world, bringing money and resources with them. They needed places to stay, food to eat, services to purchase. An entire economy grew up around blood ministration, employing thousands of people who had no direct connection to the church, but whose livelihoods depended on its continued operation. The church itself accumulated tremendous wealth. They owned property throughout Yharnam. They funded research expeditions into the Pythagorean labyrinths. They equipped and paid hunters, built cathedrals, established wards and hospitals and schools. All of this required money, and all of this money came, directly or indirectly, from the blood trade. When the beast plague began, the economic incentive to continue was overwhelming. Yes, people were transforming. Yes, beasts were appearing in the streets. But stopping the blood ministration would mean economic collapse. It would mean unemployment. It would mean the end of Yharnam as a center of pilgrimage and healing. The church's leaders, even if they had wanted to do the right thing, would have faced enormous pressure to continue. This is how institutions become trapped by their own success. The healing church was too big to fail, in the most literal sense. Its collapse would have destroyed not just its members, but the entire city that depended on it. And so they kept going, kept administering the blood, kept creating beasts, because the alternative was unthinkable. Laurence may not have intended this. He may have genuinely believed that the economic benefits of blood ministration were secondary to its spiritual and medical effects. But the system he created developed its own momentum, its own imperatives, its own reasons for perpetuating itself, regardless of consequences. The blood wasn't just healing people, it was making money. And money, as always, complicated everything. Chapter 35. The Hunter's Code. Yharnam trained the first hunters, but it was Laurence who gave them their purpose. The code they lived by, the ethics they followed, the understanding of what they were doing and why, all of this came from the founder's vision. And what was that code? Simply put, protect the church, protect the blood, protect the secret. The hunters weren't independent agents, acting according to their own conscience. They were enforcers, operating in the shadows to ensure that the healing church's reputation remained untarnished. This meant killing beasts. Yes, that was the visible part of their work, the part that could be justified to anyone who asked. Beasts were dangerous. Beasts killed people. Eliminating them was clearly a public service. But the hunters also did other things. They eliminated witnesses. They silenced troublemakers. They ensured that inconvenient truths remained buried. We see hints of this throughout the game. The way certain NPCs speak carefully about the church, choosing their words as if they know they might be overheard. The way information is compartmentalized, with different factions knowing different pieces of the truth. The general atmosphere of paranoia and suspicion that pervades Yharnam, suggesting a long history of surveillance and control. Laurence created the hunters as a solution to a problem. But like so many of his solutions, they created problems of their own. An armed force operating in secret, answering only to church authorities, accumulating power and developing their own institutional interests. This was a recipe for exactly the kind of factional conflict that eventually tore the church apart. The workshop hunters resented the church hunters. The church hunters looked down on the powder kegs. The choir had their own agenda, as did the school of Mensis, as did various other groups that emerged over time. What had started as a unified force, devoted to a single purpose, fragmented into competing camps, each convinced that they alone understood the true mission, each willing to fight the others for supremacy. Chapter 36. Ludwig's faith. We should spend more time with Ludwig. He's one of the most important figures in Bloodborne's story, and his relationship with Laurence's legacy is crucial to understanding how the church evolved. Ludwig was the first hunter of the healing church proper. Not the first hunter overall, that was German, but the first hunter who operated openly, under church authority, wearing their symbols, carrying their blessing, representing their values to the world. He was the public face of the hunt, the hero that the church could point to when people asked what they were doing about the beast plague. And Ludwig believed that's what made him so effective and so tragic. He genuinely believed in the healing church's mission. He believed that the blood was holy. He believed that the hunt was sacred work. He believed that he was doing God's will every time he raised his sword against a beast. This faith gave him strength. Ludwig was an extraordinary fighter, perhaps the greatest hunter who ever lived. He wielded a sword that seemed to glow with its own inner light, and he led his church hunters through battles that should have been impossible to win. He was inspiring and terrifying in equal measure, a figure of legend even before he fell. But faith, misdirected, becomes something dangerous. Ludwig's belief in the church prevented him from seeing its corruption. He accepted what he was told about the nature of beasts and the source of the plague. He never questioned whether the hunt was actually solving anything, or whether it was just managing symptoms while the disease spread unchecked. When Ludwig finally transformed, because they all transform, eventually his faith twisted into something horrible. In the hunter's nightmare, we find him as a massive, mutated creature, half man and half horse, screaming about his guiding moonlight and attacking anything that moves. Even in his madness, he clings to his faith. Even as a beast, he believes he's serving a holy purpose. The fight against Ludwig is one of the most emotionally complex encounters in the game. When we finally defeat him, there's a moment where he seems to regain some semblance of awareness. He asks if his hunters were good, if they lived up to the ideals he taught them, if they achieved anything worthwhile. What do you say to that? His hunters became beasts, just like he did. The church he served was corrupt from the beginning. Everything he believed was a lie, or at best, a tragic misunderstanding. But he's dying, and he's asking for comfort, and there's something in us that wants to give it to him. This is Laurence's legacy, filtered through Ludwig's faith. A good man who devoted his life to a bad cause, and never realized it until far too late. Chapter 37. The Vicar's Prayer. Let's return to Vicar Amelia, whom we fight in the Grand Cathedral. She's one of the most haunting encounters in the game, and she represents something important about what the healing church became after Laurence's death. When we first enter the cathedral, Amelia is kneeling before the altar. She's clutching the gold pendant, that relic containing Laurence's hair, and she's praying. Her words are worth considering. Seek the old blood. Let us pray. Let us wish to partake in communion. Let us partake in communion and feast upon the old blood. Our thirst for blood satiates us, soothes our fears. Seek the old blood, but beware the frailty of men. Their wills are weak, minds young. The foul beasts will dangle nectar and lure the meek into the depths. Remain wary. Our determination should be unshaken. Our faith, our fleet, once animal fear melted away. Is this a dream? She's transforming as she prays. Right there, in front of us, her body is changing. Fur is sprouting. Her form is twisting. She's becoming a beast, and she's praying for strength to resist the very thing that's happening to her. This is the church that Laurence built, reduced to its essence. Faith in the blood, even as the blood destroys. Devotion to communion, even as communion leads to damnation. The desperate hope that belief alone can save you from consequences that belief itself has created. Amelia's prayer acknowledges the danger. Beware the frailty of men. The The foul beasts will dangle nectar and lure the meek into the depths. She knows what the blood does. She knows what's happening to her, but she can't stop. The faith is too deep. The devotion is too absolute. Even as she loses herself, she clings to the words that are failing to save her. When we fight Amelia, we're fighting the church itself. We're fighting Laurence's dream, transformed into nightmare, still believing it's salvation even as it devours everything around it. Chapter 38. The Research Hall, the Old Hunters DLC, gives us a window into one of the darkest chapters of the Healing Church's history, the Research Hall. And what we find there tells us something important about how Laurence's methods evolved after his death. The Research Hall was a facility dedicated to creating celestial emissaries, humans transformed into something approaching the Great Ones. The church kidnapped people, patients, pilgrims, anyone they could get their hands on, and subjected them to horrific experiments. They pumped them full of fluids. They warped their bodies. They tried to force evolution at any cost. The patients we encounter in the Research Hall are some of the most disturbing enemies in the game. Their heads have swollen to grotesque proportions, filled with the fluids that were supposed to grant them insight. They crawl and stumble through the halls, moaning in pain, attacking anything that moves because they have no other way to express their agony. This wasn't what Laurence wanted, or was it? He founded the church to help people, yes, but he also believed that the ends justified the means. He continued blood ministration after learning about the beast plague. He covered up the transformation of countless victims. He built an institution based on secrets and lies. The Research Hall is just the logical extension of his principles. If some suffering is acceptable in pursuit of transcendence, why not more? If some victims are an acceptable cost, why not additional ones? The line that Laurence drew was arbitrary, and once his successors realized that, they had no reason to stop drawing it further and further into the darkness. Lady Maria oversaw the Research Hall. She was Gammon's student, one of the finest hunters ever trained, and she spent her days supervising the torture of innocents in pursuit of cosmic insight. The guilt of it eventually broke her. She threw away her weapons, retreated to the astral clock tower, and spent the rest of her existence guarding the secret of what she had done. When we fight Maria, we're fighting someone who tried to walk away from Laurence's legacy and couldn't escape it. Someone who realized the truth too late and was destroyed by the knowledge. Someone whose hands were covered in blood that would never wash clean. Chapter 39. The Fishing Hamlet Revisited. We touched on the fishing hamlet earlier, but it deserves a deeper exploration because what happened there is the original sin from which everything else flows. And understanding it helps us understand why Laurence's project was doomed from the very beginning. The scholars of Byrgenwerth discovered the hamlet when they were still searching for the secrets of the Great Ones. The village had been touched by Kos, a cosmic entity that had washed up on their shore. The villagers had changed. They had developed strange new organs, new senses, new connections to powers beyond human understanding. To the scholars, this was invaluable. Here was evidence of direct communion between humans and Great Ones. Here was a living laboratory where the effects of such contact could be studied. Here was the key to everything they had been seeking. And so they descended on the village and took what they wanted. The details are deliberately obscure. Bloodborne doesn't show us exactly what happened, but we can piece together the general picture. The scholars killed villagers and dissected them. They extracted the strange organs and studied them. They violated the corpse of Kos herself, cutting her open, taking her child from her body. They committed atrocities in pursuit of knowledge, and they felt no remorse, because they believed the knowledge was worth any price. This was before Laurence founded the Healing Church. This was while he was still a student at Byrgenwerth, still learning at Willem's feet. We don't know if Laurence participated directly in the hamlet, atrocity, or merely benefited from its fruits. But it doesn't really matter. The knowledge gained from that crime became the foundation of everything that followed. The old blood, the beast plague, the hunter's nightmare, the curse of the orphan. All of it traces back to that village, to that moment when scholars decided that human lives were acceptable fuel for the engine of progress. Laurence inherited this sin. He built his church on its foundation, and no matter what he did afterward, no matter how noble his intentions or how genuine his desire to help, he could never escape the taint of that original crime. Chapter 40. The Moon Presence. We should talk about the Moon Presence, the Great One, who presides over the hunter's dream, because understanding this entity helps us understand the cosmic context in which Laurence's tragedy played out. The Moon Presence is mysterious, even by the standards of Bloodborne's Great Ones. We don't know its goals. We don't know why it created the hunter's dream, or why it binds hunters to its service. We don't know what it wants from us, or from the hunt, or from the nightmare that has consumed Yharnam. What we do know is that it's been manipulating events for a very long time. The hunter's dream didn't exist before the church. Someone created it, or was involved in its creation, and that someone was almost certainly connected to Laurence's inner circle. Gehrman is bound there. The doll was modeled after Lady Maria. The workshop in the dream is a replica of Gehrman's real workshop. Everything about the place suggests a connection to the earliest days of the hunt. Some players theorize that Laurence himself made a deal with the Moon Presence, that his ability to found the healing church, to access the old blood, to build everything he built, was contingent on serving this cosmic entity's unknowable purposes. It's speculation, but it fits the pattern. Laurence made one deal with forbidden power. Why not another? If this theory is correct, then Laurence wasn't just a brilliant scholar who made a terrible mistake. He was a pawn in a game he didn't understand, manipulated by forces beyond his comprehension into doing exactly what they wanted. His choice to use the old blood wasn't really a choice at all. It was the Moon Presence pulling strings, arranging events, setting up the nightmare that would eventually consume an entire city. This is a darker reading of Laurence's story, but it's consistent with Bloodborne's themes. The Great Ones don't respect human agency. They don't care about our choices or our intentions. They use us for purposes we can't fathom, and when we're no longer useful, they discard us. Laurence thought he was changing the world. He was just playing a part that had been written for him before he was born. Chapter 41. The Doll's Compassion. In all the darkness of Bloodborne, one figure stands out as genuinely kind: the doll in the hunter's dream. She tends to hunters. She channels their blood echoes into strength. She offers comfort and encouragement in a world that has none to spare. The doll was created by Gehrman, modeled after Lady Maria, the woman he loved and lost. She's artificial in the most literal sense, a construct of porcelain and fabric, animated by something we don't fully understand, and yet she seems to feel genuine compassion. She seems to care about the hunters she serves, to wish them well, to hope for their success. This is relevant to Laurence, because the doll represents something his system was supposed to provide, but never did: unconditional support. The healing church claimed to care about people. It claimed to offer healing and salvation and communion with the divine. But everything it gave came with strings attached. The blood had consequences. The faith had demands. The help was never free. The doll asks nothing. She serves, because serving is her nature, or perhaps because she has come to genuinely love the hunters she tends. She's the one good thing in Laurence's legacy, and she wasn't even intentional. She exists because Gehrman was lonely, because he missed Maria, because he wanted something to fill the void in his life. She's an accident of grief, not a product of design. Maybe that's the lesson. Maybe the best things come not from grand designs and ambitious projects, but from small, personal, almost accidental acts of love. Laurence tried to save humanity and created a plague. Gehrman tried to ease his loneliness and created the one genuinely good thing in the entire nightmare. Chapter 42. The skeptics and survivors. Not everyone in Yharnam believed in the healing church. Throughout the game, we encounter NPCs who express skepticism, hostility, or outright rejection of everything Laurence built. There's the skeptical man, who mocks the church's claims and refuses to accept that the blood has any special power. There's Dura, the retired hunter, who has come to believe that beasts are victims rather than monsters, and who attacks us if we try to kill them. There's Eileen the crow, who hunts hunters rather than beasts, recognizing that the greatest threat to Yharnam comes from those who have lost themselves to the blood. These characters represent the road not taken. They're what the people of Yharnam might have become if they had heeded Willem's warnings instead of Laurence's promises. They've seen through the lies, rejected the faith, and found their own ways to survive in a world that has gone mad. But their survival is precarious. The skeptical man can be led to the cathedral ward or Aidan chapel, where his fate depends on our choices. Dura will die if we don't leave him alone. Eileen can be killed in the course of her hunt, overcome by the very blood-drunk hunters she's trying to stop. The system Laurence created is hostile to skeptics. It grinds them down, isolates them, eventually destroys them. This is how corrupt institutions protect themselves. They don't just punish dissent, they make dissent nearly impossible to sustain. The Healing Church controlled so much of Yharnam's infrastructure, its economy, its social fabric, that rejecting the church meant rejecting almost everything. The skeptics we meet are survivors, yes, but they're also remnants. The last holdouts of a perspective that has been systematically eliminated. Chapter 43. The Weight of Secrecy. One of the most corrosive aspects of Laurence's legacy was the culture of secrecy he established. From the very beginning, the Healing Church operated on a need-to-know basis, compartmentalizing information, hiding the truth from the very people whose lives depended on it. The public didn't know about the beast plague until it was too late to stop. They didn't know that the miraculous blood had a dark side. They didn't know that every transfusion was a gamble, a roll of the dice that might end in salvation or transformation. The church kept them ignorant because informed people might make different choices, and different choices would threaten the system. The hunters didn't know the full truth either. Many of them believed they were fighting a natural plague, a corruption from outside rather than from within. They didn't know that every beast they killed had once been a patient of the church, a pilgrim who came seeking healing. That knowledge might have made them question their work, and questioning hunters are ineffective hunters. Even within the church hierarchy, information was carefully controlled. The choir knew things that ordinary clergy didn't. The school of Mensis had secrets that they kept even from other church factions. Everyone had some piece of the truth, but no one had all of it. And this made it nearly impossible for anyone to see the full picture of what was happening. Secrecy protects power. Laurence understood this, even if he didn't articulate it explicitly. By controlling information, he controlled the narrative. By controlling the narrative, he controlled the people. And by controlling the people, he ensured that his project could continue no matter how many red flags appeared, no matter how much evidence accumulated that something was terribly wrong. Chapter 44. The Children of the Blood. Some of the most disturbing implications of Laurence's system involve children, because the blood doesn't just affect adults, it affects everyone who receives it, and the children of Yharnam were no exception. We don't see many children in Bloodborne. The streets are suspiciously empty of them, which raises uncomfortable questions about what happened. Did they transform into beasts, their smaller bodies, unable to resist the blood's corruption? Were they hidden away somewhere, protected from the plague by desperate parents? Or did something worse happen, something the game doesn't show us directly? There are hints. The orphanage in the upper cathedral ward suggests that the choir was particularly interested in children. The celestial children we encounter there, those small pale beings with oversized heads, might be what remains of orphans subjected to the same experiments as the adults in the research hall. If so, then the church wasn't just killing its adult patients, it was killing children too, all in pursuit of communion with the great ones. This is the darkest corner of Laurence's legacy. Whatever his original intentions, the system he created eventually began consuming the most vulnerable members of society. Children who should have been protected were instead exploited, experimented on, transformed into something no longer human. We don't know if Laurence would have approved. He died before the worst excesses of the choir and the school of Mensis, but he created the conditions that made those excesses possible. He established the precedent that the ends justified the means, that some suffering was acceptable in pursuit of transcendence. His successors simply extended that logic to its terrible conclusion. Chapter 45. What the blood wants. Here's a question that Bloodborne never directly answers. Does the old blood have its own agenda? Throughout the game, the blood is treated as a substance, a tool, something to be used by humans for human purposes. But there are hints that it might be something more, that it might have its own will, its own desires, its own reasons for doing what it does. The blood comes from the Great Ones. These are cosmic entities of vast intelligence and incomprehensible motives. Why would they allow their blood to be harvested and distributed? Why would they permit humans to use it for purposes that seem to have nothing to do with them? One possibility is that the blood is a vector, a way for the Great Ones to spread their influence, to touch human minds and bodies, to prepare the ground for something we don't yet understand. The beast plague might not be a side effect at all. It might be the point. The Great Ones might want humans to transform, to evolve, to become something new that serves their unknowable purposes. If this is true, then Laurence wasn't just a victim of his own hubris. He was a tool, consciously or unconsciously, serving the agenda of beings beyond his comprehension. The healing church wasn't spreading salvation. It was spreading infection, and every person who received blood ministration, every hunter who drank deeply of the old blood, was being recruited into an army that doesn't even know it's fighting. This is speculation, but it's the kind of speculation that Bloodborne encourages. The game is full of mysteries that have no clear answers, implications that lead nowhere definite, questions that resist resolution. The nature of the blood is one of those questions, and how you answer it changes how you understand everything else. Chapter 46. The Artistic Vision. Let's step back from the lore for a moment and talk about what Bloodborne is doing as a work of art. Because understanding the game's themes helps us understand why Laurence's story is told the way it is. Bloodborne is, among other things, a meditation on the dangers of knowledge. It asks what happens when humans discover things they weren't meant to know, when they reach beyond their natural limitations, when they touch powers that should have remained untouched. The answer, consistently, is catastrophe. The scholars of Byrgenwerth destroyed themselves. The healing church destroyed a city. The school of Mensis destroyed their own minds in pursuit of contact with the cosmos. Laurence is the central figure in this meditation. He's the one who made the choice that set everything in motion. He's the one who heard the warning and ignored it. He's the one who decided that the potential benefits of the old blood outweighed its risks and proved catastrophically wrong. But the game doesn't present him as a simple villain. His motivations were good. His intentions were noble. He wanted to help people, and the blood really could help them, at least in the short term. The tragedy is that he was right about the blood's benefits and wrong about its costs, and by the time he understood the truth, it was too late. This is sophisticated storytelling. It refuses easy answers. It presents a character who is simultaneously sympathetic and responsible for tremendous evil. It asks us to hold two contradictory truths in our minds at once. Laurence wanted good things, and Laurence caused terrible things. Both are true. Neither cancels the other out. Chapter 47. Our role in the story. As players, we occupy a strange position in Laurence's story. We arrive after the catastrophe has already occurred. The choices have been made. The consequences have played out. There's nothing we can do to prevent the beast plague or save the people of Yharnam or redeem the healing church. And yet we're not merely observers. We participate in the system Laurence created. We receive blood ministration. We hunt beasts. We grow stronger by consuming the blood echoes of our victims. We do all the things that hunters have always done, following paths that Laurence established centuries ago. In a sense, we're continuing his work, not his explicit goals. We're not trying to achieve communion with the Great Ones or transcend human limitations, but his methods. We use the blood. We accept its power. We kill without questioning whether the things we're killing deserve to die. This implication is uncomfortable, and it's meant to be. Bloodborne doesn't let us off the hook. It doesn't position us as heroes who are somehow exempt from the moral compromises that destroyed everyone else. We're participants in a corrupt system, beneficiaries of tainted knowledge, hunters walking the same road that led Laurence to his doom. The game's endings reflect this. We can escape, but escape doesn't fix anything. We can take Gehrman's place, but that just perpetuates the cycle. We can become a great one, but even that doesn't address the fundamental problems that Laurence's choices created. There's no ending where we make things right, where we redeem the healing church, where we save Yharnam. The best we can do is survive, and survival in Bloodborne always comes at a cost. Chapter 48. The Silence of the Great Ones. Throughout everything we've discussed, the Great Ones have remained enigmatic. They're the source of the blood. They're the objects of the church's worship. They're the beings whose communion Laurence sought. But they never explain themselves. They never tell us what they want or why they do what they do. This silence is significant. It means that everything humans believe about the Great Ones might be wrong. The healing church's theology, built on interpretations and assumptions, might be completely mistaken. The blood might not be a gift at all. The transformations might not be failures of communion, but successful ones. Everything could be backward. We'd have no way of knowing. Laurence built his entire project on assumptions about what the Great Ones wanted and what the blood could do. He had no direct communication with them, no way to verify his beliefs. He was guessing, essentially, making choices based on incomplete information and hoping he was right. He wasn't right, or maybe he was, and we just don't understand how. The Great One's silence makes it impossible to know, and that uncertainty is part of what makes Bloodborne so unsettling. We can't even be sure of what we're dealing with, whether the horrors we face are the result of human hubris, or cosmic indifference, or something else entirely. Chapter 49. The Final Accounting. So let's sum up what Laurence accomplished. Let's take a full accounting of his legacy, good and bad, intended and unintended. On the positive side, he created an institution that brought hope to countless people. For decades, the healing church provided real help to those who were suffering. Diseases were cured, wounds were healed, lives were saved. This was real, this mattered. The people who came to Yharnam and left healthy were genuinely helped by what Laurence built. On the negative side, he created a beast plague that destroyed a city. He established systems of secrecy and control that enabled terrible abuses. He founded an institution that would eventually torture innocents, experiment on children, and pursue increasingly desperate and destructive research. He damned countless souls to eternal nightmare. He broke his promise to his mentor and proved every one of Willem's warnings correct. On the ambiguous side, he may have advanced human understanding of the cosmos. He may have opened doors that will eventually lead somewhere worthwhile. He may have been a necessary step in humanity's evolution, a painful but required transition on the way to something better. We can't know this. The story isn't finished. The Great Ones haven't revealed their purposes. How do you weigh these against each other? How do you judge a man whose best intentions led to the worst outcomes? How do you assign responsibility in a universe where cosmic entities manipulate human affairs and nothing is quite what it seems? Bloodborne doesn't tell us. It presents the evidence and lets us draw our own conclusions. And maybe that's the most honest approach. Life rarely offers clear verdicts. People rarely fit neatly into categories of good and evil. Laurence was both and neither, and something in between that doesn't have a name. Chapter 50. A Lullaby for Yharnam. The night grows long. The hunt continues. Somewhere in the darkness, beasts are stirring, and hunters are sharpening their blades, and the blood is calling to anyone who will listen. Laurence is still burning in the nightmare. He will burn forever, or at least until something changes that we can't predict or understand. His dream of healing has become an eternity of suffering, and there's no redemption arc waiting at the end of the road. But his story persists. We tell it to each other, in videos like this one, in discussions and debates and late-night conversations. We try to understand what he did and why he did it. We use his example to think about our own choices, our own ambitions, our own willingness to reach for power that might cost more than we're willing to pay. That's something. That's not nothing. Even in failure, even in damnation, Laurence serves a purpose. He shows us what happens when good intentions go wrong. He warns us about the dangers of certainty, of hubris, of believing that we know better than those who came before. Fear the old blood. Willem said it. Laurence promised to remember it. And now we say it too, passing the adage down through generations of players, keeping the warning alive, even as the man who should have heeded it burns in eternal torment. May you find your worth in the waking world. May you remember what Laurence forgot. And may you sleep well, friends, dreaming dreams that don't consume you. Until next time, grant us eyes. Grant us eyes. Plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy. But wait, don't drift off just yet. There's still more to explore. More corners of Laurence's legacy to illuminate. Stay with me a little longer, and let's delve even deeper into the shadows. Chapter 51. The Geography of Guilt. Yharnam is not just a city, it's a monument to Laurence's choices, built in stone and shadow. Every district, every ward, every winding street tells part of his story. Consider central Yharnam, where we begin our journey. This is where ordinary people lived, where the effects of the beast plague hit hardest. The burning crosses, the mobs of terrified citizens, the beasts lurking in every alley. This is what happens when Laurence's miracle goes wrong at the street level. These weren't scholars or hunters, they were just people who trusted the church and paid the ultimate price. The cathedral ward rises above central Yharnam, cleaner and grander, home to the church's religious functions. Here the blood ministration was administered with ceremony and reverence. Here priests in white robes told the faithful that they were receiving a sacred gift. The architecture is beautiful, all soaring arches and stained glass, designed to inspire awe and devotion. It's a temple to Laurence's vision, and it's just as corrupted as everything else. Old Yharnam lies abandoned below, sealed away and forgotten. This is where the beast plague first became undeniable, where the transformation happened so fast and so completely that the church had no choice but to burn everything. The powder kegs, a faction of hunters who preferred fire and explosions to subtlety, were sent to contain the outbreak. They did their job. Old Yharnam is a charred ruin now, home only to beasts and the hunter Jorah, who guards them against those who would continue the slaughter. Each of these districts represents a phase of Laurence's failure. Central Yharnam is the present, where the plague continues to spread. The cathedral ward is the past, where the decisions were made that led to this. Old Yharnam is the future, the fate that awaits the rest of the city if nothing changes. And connecting them all, like arteries carrying tainted blood, are the streets and sewers and passages that allow movement through Yharnam's corrupted body. The city is designed for secrets, hidden paths, and locked doors everywhere. It's as if the architects knew from the beginning that some things would need to be hidden. Chapter 52. The Forbidden Woods. Beyond Yharnam proper lies the Forbidden Woods, a twisted forest that serves as a boundary between the city and the truth. To reach Byrgenwerth, to find Master Willem, to understand where everything began, you have to pass through this place. The woods are exactly what the name suggests. Forbidden. The church sealed them away, prevented people from entering, made it clear that whatever lay beyond was not for ordinary eyes. This wasn't protection, it was concealment. The path to Byrgenwerth was blocked because Byrgenwerth contained answers that the church didn't want anyone to find. The creatures we encounter in the Forbidden Woods are unlike the beasts of Yharnam. They're more human, more intelligent, more deliberately malicious. The villagers who live there have transformed into something snake-like, hissing and striking from the shadows. They're the descendants of people who were exposed to the blood, but in different ways, through different channels, producing different results. And at the heart of the woods lies a great pit, a hole in the earth that leads down to the Perthemarian labyrinths. This is where the old blood came from. This is the source of everything. The pit is literally and metaphorically the hole at the center of Laurence's project. The gap in understanding that swallowed a city whole. Chapter 53. The Blood-Starved Beast. Let's talk about a specific enemy for a moment. The Blood-Starved Beast. It's one of the bosses we encounter in Old Yharnam, and it's a perfect encapsulation of what Laurence's blood does to people. The Blood-Starved Beast was once human. You can see it in the creature's frame, in the way it moves, in the almost pitiable desperation of its attacks. It was someone who received blood ministration, someone who came to Yharnam seeking healing, and this is what they became. But here's the thing, the blood-starved beast is starving. Despite all the blood it has consumed, despite all the victims it has claimed, it's never satisfied. The hunger that drove it to transform has only grown stronger with each feeding. It's trapped in a cycle of craving and consumption that can never end, always chasing a satiation that doesn't exist. This is what addiction looks like when it's made flesh. The blood-starved beast is Laurence's entire project, condensed into a single enemy. The promise of the blood was fulfillment. The reality is endless hunger. The people who received ministration were supposed to be healed, made whole, lifted up. Instead, they were hollowed out, reduced to nothing but appetite, transformed into monsters that can never stop wanting. When we fight the blood-starved beast, we're fighting Laurence's broken promise. We're putting down another victim of his dream, adding our violence to the centuries of violence that his choices made necessary. Chapter 54. The Shadows of Yharnam. Some enemies in Bloodborne seem to understand what they are. The Shadows of Yharnam are among them. We encounter these figures at the edge of the Forbidden Woods, guarding the path to Byrgenwerth. They're cloaked and hooded, wielding swords and flame, fighting with coordination that suggests something more than bestial instinct. They're not mindless like most beasts. They're purposeful. They know what they're doing. The Shadows are servants of the Queen of the Pythamarian Labyrinth, guardians of ancient secrets that predate the Healing Church entirely, but they've been co-opted into Laurence's system, incorporated into the web of power and concealment that keeps the truth hidden. They guard the path to Byrgenwerth because someone wants that path guarded, because the knowledge behind it is too dangerous to be freely accessed. There's something tragic about the Shadows. They're competent, they're effective, they work together with genuine teamwork, covering each other's weaknesses, coordinating their attacks. In another context, they might be admirable, but here, in the service of concealment and control, their competence just makes them more dangerous. They're good at what they do, and what they do is perpetuate Laurence's secrets. Chapter 55. The Nightmare of Mensis. We should spend more time with the School of Mensis, because they represent the ultimate evolution of Laurence's methods. If the Healing Church was corrupted, the School of Mensis was corruption incarnate. Mensis was founded by scholars who believed that the Church wasn't going far enough. The blood ministration, the communion, the careful accumulation of insight, all of it was too slow, too cautious, too limited. The school wanted direct contact with the Great Ones. They wanted to summon one into their presence and commune with it, face to face. They succeeded. That's the horrifying thing. They actually did it. The ritual of Mensis called forth the entity known as the Brain of Mensis, an enormous pulsating mass of eyes and flesh that exists in its own pocket, dimension. The scholars gathered at Yharnam, the unseen village, and they performed their beckoning, and something answered. The result was catastrophe. Everyone in Yharnam died instantly, their minds destroyed by contact with something they couldn't comprehend. Their bodies were left behind, frozen in place, still clutching the instruments of their ritual. The brain itself was trapped between worlds, neither fully present nor fully absent, driving anyone who looked at it into frenzy. This is where Laurence's logic leads. If some blood is good, more blood is better. If some communion is valuable, direct communion is invaluable. The School of Mensis just followed the principles Laurence established to their ultimate conclusion, and that conclusion was total annihilation. Mikalash, the host of the nightmare, still wanders the dimension that was created by the Mensis ritual. He's mad, completely mad, cackling, about eyes and brains, and kos, or some say kos. He achieved what he wanted. He made contact with the cosmos, and the cosmos destroyed him, as it destroys everyone who touches it too directly. Chapter 56. The Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter. The Old Hunters DLC begins with the Eye of a Blood-Drunk Hunter. This item allows us to access the Hunter's Nightmare, to enter that prison dimension where hunters go when they've been consumed by the blood. But think about what that means. The eye belonged to someone, a hunter who drank so deeply of the blood that they lost themselves entirely. A person who started as we did, receiving ministration, joining the hunt, accumulating power. They walked the same path we're walking now, and they ended up damned. The eye is a warning. It's the game telling us that our journey has consequences, that the power we're accumulating comes at a cost, that every blood echo we consume, every vial we inject, every beast we kill, is pushing us closer to the same fate that claimed the eye's original owner. We use the eye to enter the nightmare. We touch it to our own eyes, symbolically accepting the vision of the blood drunk, and reality tears open to admit us. This is communion with the cursed. This is joining the damned. This is what Laurence's legacy looks like from the inside. Chapter 57. The Astral Clock Tower. Lady Maria waits in the Astral Clock Tower, guarding the secret that lies beyond. She's one of the most compelling figures in Bloodborne, and her relationship with Laurence's legacy is complex and tragic. Maria was a student of Yharnam, one of the finest hunters ever trained. She was there for the assault on the fishing hamlet, participating in, or at least witnessing, the atrocities that created the curse of the hunter's nightmare. She was one of the inner circle, privy to secrets that ordinary hunters never learned. And at some point, she broke. The guilt became too much. She threw away her weapon, the Rakio, discarding it into the well of the research hall, where it would be lost. She retreated to the clock tower and stayed there, guarding the path to the hamlet, waiting for someone to come and force her to fight again. When we encounter Maria, she's resigned. She knows why we're there. She knows what we want. She doesn't try to reason with us or explain herself. She just draws her blades and attacks, fighting with a ferocity that suggests she's been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The fight against Maria is beautiful and terrible. She moves like water, flowing from attack to attack, with impossible grace. She uses her own blood as a weapon, slashing herself open to add range and power to her strikes. She is everything a hunter could aspire to be. All that skill and dedication turn to one final purpose. When we kill her, and we do kill her, eventually there's no victory music, just silence, and a key, and the door to the truth that lies beyond. Maria was a casualty of Laurence's system, a good person, broken by the demands of a corrupt institution. Her death doesn't feel like triumph, it feels like mercy. Chapter 58. The Orphan's Cry. At the end of the hunter's nightmare on the shore of the fishing hamlet, we find the Orphan of Kos. This creature is the final boss of the Old Hunters DLC, and it's one of the most challenging fights in the game. But it's also one of the most emotionally resonant, because the orphan isn't a monster in the traditional sense. It's a baby, essentially born from the corpse of its mother, thrust into a nightmare it never asked to inhabit. The orphan screams when it sees us, not a roar of challenge, like most bosses, a scream of pain, of grief, of rage. It attacks with its placenta, swinging the membrane that connected it to its mother as a weapon. It's fighting for its life, for its mother, for something it doesn't understand, but knows has been taken from it. This is what Byrgenwerth did. This is what Laurence inherited. The scholars killed Kuz, violated her corpse, stole her child, and the orphan has been screaming ever since. Its cry is the foundation of the hunter's nightmare. Its curse is what trapped Laurence and all the others in eternal torment. When we kill the orphan, we end its suffering, and then we find the black ghost on the shore, the spirit that clings to this place, and we destroy that too. Only then does the nightmare begin to fade. Only then does the curse begin to lift. Only then can the hunters trapped within find some measure of peace. This is what redemption looks like in Bloodborne. Not forgiveness, but ending. Not healing, but death. The crimes committed at the fishing hamlet can never be undone. The victims can never be restored. All we can do is end the cycle of suffering. Stop the eternal repetition. Let the dead finally rest. Chapter 59. The Lecture Building. There's a strange place in Bloodborne that doesn't quite fit with anything else. The Lecture Building. It's a hub area connecting various nightmares and realms, and it's full of strange slug-like scholars who seem frozen in a state of transformation. The Lecture Building is what remains of a place of learning that was pulled into the nightmare. The students there were studying something dangerous, pursuing knowledge they shouldn't have pursued, and they paid the price. Now they slither through halls that no longer exist in the waking world, attending lectures that will never end. This is what happens to knowledge seekers in Bloodborne's world. They don't find enlightenment. They find transformation. They become things that are neither human nor beast, stuck in perpetual states of incomplete evolution. The cosmos doesn't grant understanding, it grants change, whether you want it or not. Laurence must have known scholars like these. At Byrgenwerth, surrounded by people who were pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, he must have seen what happened when that pushing went too far. And yet he pushed anyway. He believed he could do it safely, that he could take what he wanted without paying the price that others had paid. The Lecture Building is proof that he was wrong. Knowledge has costs. The cosmos doesn't give freely, and everyone who reaches for its secrets is eventually transformed by them. Chapter 60. The Weight of Memory. In the Hunter's Dream, there's a small cemetery behind the workshop. Tombstones rise from the ground, markers for hunters who came before. We can use these graves to return to areas we've previously visited, as if memory itself allows travel through the nightmare. This is a subtle piece of world building, but it's important. The tombstones suggest that other hunters have walked this path, that we're not the first to be bound to the dream, not the first to receive Gammon's guidance, not the first to fight through Yharnam's streets and face its horrors. There were others before us, and there will be others after. Laurence isn't buried in this cemetery. His skull is in the Grand Cathedral. His body is burning in the nightmare. He doesn't get a grave, a marker, a place of rest. His is a different kind of remembrance, not the quiet memorial of a headstone, but the eternal torment of a curse. But we remember him anyway. Every time we walk through Yharnam, we're walking through his legacy. Every time we fight a beast, we're fighting something his choices created. Every time we use the blood, we're participating in the system he built. He is everywhere. Even though he's been dead for centuries, his presence suffuses everything. This is what it means to found something. Laurence will never escape what he created. Even in death, even in nightmare, even in eternal torment, he is defined by the healing church and everything that followed from it. His identity has been subsumed by his legacy. He is no longer a man. He is an origin point, a cause, a name attached to consequences. Chapter 61. The Embrace of Sleep. We've journeyed far tonight, through Yharnam's bloodied streets and the depths of the hunter's nightmare, through the halls of Byrgenwerth and the horrors of the research hall, through memory and myth and the terrible weight of good intentions gone wrong. Laurence wanted to help people. Remember that. Whatever else he became, whatever horrors his choices unleashed, he started with compassion. He looked at human suffering and couldn't accept it. He reached for a solution because he cared too much to stand by and do nothing. That caring destroyed him. It destroyed everyone it touched, but it was real. It was genuine. And in the ruins of Yharnam, in the nightmare that consumes hunters, in the endless cycle of blood and beasts and burning, that original spark of compassion is still there, buried deep, almost forgotten, but present. Maybe that's the final lesson of Laurence's story. Not that caring is dangerous, though it is. Not that good intentions don't matter, though they don't, in the end, prevent bad outcomes. But that the impulse to help, the desire to ease suffering, the need to make things better, is fundamentally human. It's what separates us from the beasts, even as we become beasts ourselves. Laurence lost his humanity, but he lost it in pursuit of something humane. And there's a tragedy in that, a genuine sadness that survives all the horror and all the failure and all the justified condemnation. Fear the old blood. Remember the adage. Learn from Laurence's mistake, but maybe also understand why he made them. Good night, friends. Sleep well, and may you find your worth in the waking world. The night ends, the hunt continues elsewhere, and in the hunter's nightmare, Laurence burns on, forever and ever, the founder who betrayed everything, remembered and forgotten, pitied and condemned, trapped in the amber of his own catastrophe. Tonight we told his story. Tomorrow, perhaps, we'll tell another. Until then, a hunter is never alone. Chapter 62. The sound of the bell. There's one more thing we should discuss before we truly end. The beckoning bell. That simple item that allows hunters to call for help from other worlds. In the lore of Bloodborne, the bells are connected to the Great Ones somehow. They resonate with frequencies that can pierce the barriers between realities, allowing hunters from different dreams to assist each other. It's a beautiful mechanic that speaks to one of the game's quieter themes, solidarity. Laurence worked alone. Oh, he had collaborators and followers and an entire institution built around his vision. But the fundamental choice to pursue the old blood, to break with Willem, to found the healing church, that was his decision, made in isolation, without truly consulting anyone who might have dissuaded him. The bells suggest a different approach. They say that hunters shouldn't face the nightmare alone, that calling for help isn't weakness, but wisdom, that the horrors of Yharnam are too great for any single person to bear. When we ring the beckoning bell, we're acknowledging our limitations. We're saying that we need assistance, that we're not too proud to accept it, that we value survival more than ego. This is the opposite of what Laurence did. He was so certain of his own righteousness that he couldn't hear the warnings of those who knew better. Maybe that's the lesson encoded in the bells. Ask for help. Listen to others. Don't assume you have all the answers. The nightmare that consumed Yharnam might have been prevented if Laurence had been willing to ring a bell of his own. Chapter 63. The blood echoes of memory. Everything we've discussed tonight, Laurence's ambition, his failure, his eternal torment, exists as a kind of blood echo in its own right. A resonance of the past that persists into the present, shaping the world even though its source is long gone. The entire city of Yharnam is built from these echoes. Every stone carries the weight of decisions made centuries ago. Every beast remembers, somewhere deep in its corrupted consciousness, being something else. Every hunter walks paths that have been walked before, fights battles that have been fought before, makes choices that have been made before. We can't escape the past in Bloodborne. We can only understand it, confront it, and try to learn from it. That's what this journey has been about. Not just telling Laurence's story, but understanding how his story connects to everything else, how his choices ripple outward through time and space and nightmare. You carry blood echoes when you play. You carry the accumulated experience of everyone and everything you've killed. And now, having listened to this story, you carry something else. An understanding, perhaps, a perspective, a way of seeing Yharnam that you didn't have before. That's what stories are for. Not just entertainment, though they are that, but transmission, the passing of knowledge from one mind to another. Laurence is dead, but his story survives. And through that survival, something of him endures beyond the nightmare. Final thoughts. What we remember. The moon hangs low over Yharnam tonight, as it hangs low every night. The blood moon, the pale blood moon, the eye in the sky that watches everything and understands nothing, or perhaps understands everything and watches nothing. Laurence saw that moon. He walked under it. He dreamed beneath it. And somewhere in his burning consciousness, trapped forever in the nightmare he helped create, he sees it still. We will forget much of what we discussed tonight. That's how memory works. The details will fade, the specific arguments will blur, but something will remain. Eye impression, a feeling, a sense of having glimpsed something important in the darkness. That's enough. That's all stories can do. Plant seeds and hope they grow. Share truths and hope they're remembered. Speak into the void and hope something hears. Laurence made promises he couldn't keep. Let us make a different kind of promise. Let us promise to remember, to learn, to think twice before reaching for power we don't understand. To fear the old blood, not because we're told to, but because we've seen what happens when we don't. The hunt is long, the night is eternal, but we are not alone, and we are not without hope. Sleep now, let the nightmare fade, and when you wake, may you find your worth in the waking world. Good night.